This video is on solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So this is when you have a quadratic equation that's in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, and you need to make sure that you have 0 on the right-hand side of the equation before you can use this. And so if you have a quadratic in this form, then x is going to equal this, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times ac all over 2a. And so a then is always the number in front of x squared, b is always the number in front of x, and c is always your constant or number without an x variable attached to it. So you can always use this quadratic formula in order to solve any quadratic equation that you have. So in our first example, we have x squared plus 4x minus 7 equals 0. And so we're going to plug this into our quadratic, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So a for us is the number in front of x squared, and when there's no number there, it's an implied 1. And then b is the number in front of x, so that's a 4. And then c is the number that doesn't have an x, or a constant, which is negative 7. So now plug those numbers into our quadratic formula. We want negative b, so that's going to be negative 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that'll be 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, and then times c, which is negative 7. And then we want to divide this by 2 times a, and since a is 1, it's just going to be 2 this time. So figure out what this is. We have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16, and then negative 4 times 1 times negative 7 is positive 28, so that's going to be plus 28, and then we're dividing all of this by 2. So we have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 28, and 16 plus 28 gives us 44, and then we're dividing that all by 2. So we have negative 4. We can simplify the square root of 44 because 44 is 4 times 11, and we can take the square root of 44, it's 2. So we have negative 4 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 11, and all of that's being divided by 2. And now you can factor a 2 out of your numerator. You'd have 2 times the quantity negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 11 all over 2. And now that you have this 2 factored out in the numerator, you can cancel it with a 2 in your denominator. So our final answer is negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 11. And that's really 2 answers there. You have negative 2 plus the square root of 11 and negative 2 minus the square root of 11. Okay. On your test, you can just leave it with the plus or minus notation there. I think on my math lab it does ask you to separate them like that, though. In our next example, 3x squared minus 9x equals negative 2. So again, you have to make sure that you have 0 on the right-hand side before you begin this. So we want to add this 2 to both sides of our equation before we get started. That gives us 3x squared minus 9x plus 2 equals 0. Now we want to use the quadratic formula. That's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And a for us this time is 3. It's the number in front of x squared. B is always the number in front of x, that's negative 9. And c is your constant or number without an x, so that's 2 for us this time. So we want negative b or the opposite of b, so that for us is going to be positive 9 because our b is negative 9. And then the square root of b squared, remember to put this in parentheses, negative 9 squared, because when you square a negative 9, it's going to be positive, so you have to make sure you're careful about that. And then minus 4 times a, and a is 3, and times c, which is 2. And then this all gets divided by 2 times a, and our a is 3. So we have 9 plus or minus the square root of positive 81, and then minus, we have 4 times 3 is 12, and 12 times 2 is 24. And then this is all being divided by 6. So we have 9 plus or minus, and 81 minus 24 gives us square root of 57. And that's all being divided by 6. And 57 is divisible by 3. But it's 3 times 19, which are both prime, so we can't simplify the square root of 57. So that will be our final answer, 9 plus or minus the square root of 57 over 6. Okay. Our next example here, 5x squared equals negative 10x plus 3. Again, we want everything on one side, so we're going to add 10x and add 3 to both sides. That will give us 5x squared plus 10x plus 3 equals 0. So our a this time is going to be 5, the number in front of x squared here. And then our b is going to be 10, it's the number right in front of x. And then c is going to be positive 3. So the quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So negative b is going to be negative 10 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so it'll be 10 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 5, and then times c, which is 3. And all over 2 times a, and our a is 5. So we have negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 100. And then we have minus 5 times 4 is 20, and then times 3 gives us 60. And this is all over 2 times 5, which is 10. So we have negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 40 all over 10. And we can simplify the square root of 40 because 40 is 4 times 10, and we can take the square root of 4, it's 2. So we have negative 10 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 10, and this is all over 10. And we have a common factor of 2 in our numerator, so we're going to factor that out. That'll give me 2 times the quantity negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 10, and this is all being divided by 10. And now we can simplify the 2 and the 10. That'll leave me with a 5 in the denominator. So we have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 10 all over 5. And you can't simplify this any further. Because of this addition, you can't simplify these 5s. And you can't do anything with this 10 because it's underneath a square root. And one more example, whenever you see fractions like this, I do not like to plug fractions into the quadratic equation, so I multiply by my least common denominator to get rid of my fractions. And so the denominators right now are 18 and 9. That makes my LCD, or my least common denominator, 18. So I'm going to multiply every term in this by 18, and that will get rid of my fractions. Just don't forget to multiply this x by 18. That's really common for people to forget to multiply that one. Okay, so these 18s cancel and we're left with x squared. And then we have plus 18x in the middle. So again, don't forget to multiply this x in the middle by the 18. And then plus, when we multiply 35/9 by 18, 9 goes into itself once and into 18 twice, so that gives you 70. And 0 times 18 is still 0. Okay, so now we're going to use the quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. b is is 18, so that's going to be negative 18 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that'll be 18 squared. Minus 4 times a, and a is 1, and times c, which is 70. And then divided by 2 times a, and a for us is 1, so that's just 2. We have negative 18 plus or minus the square root and 18 squared. What does that give us? 324. And then minus 280. right? 70 times 4. Yes, 280. And this is all over 2. So negative 18 plus or minus 324 minus 280 gives us 44. And this is all over 2. And again, we can simplify the square root of 44. 44 is 4 times 11. So it's going to be negative 18 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 11 over 2. And again, now we can factor a 2 out of our numerator. And so we'll have negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 11 inside the parentheses. And then these 2's can cancel. So our final answer will be negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 11. And I only did this for the first one, but you have to be careful and remember that this is really two solutions to this. It's negative 9 plus the square root of 11 and negative 9 minus the square root of 11. And again, in my math lab, I believe they want you to have these two separate answers instead of this one with a plus or minus symbol in the middle. On a test for me, though, you can leave that plus or minus symbol in there or on a worksheet. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.